It was 2019 when the COVID-19 virus first hit the world. At first, no one expected it would change anything, but things escalated quickly. Soon, however, in 2020, the cure was found. The mandatory vaccine made sure that life could return to normal as quickly as possible. The world rejoiced. It seemed that the worst had passed. Who knew it was just the beginning? In 2025, the very vaccine introduced just 5 years prior, meant to save the human race, mutated and made its first appearance in a live host, mimicking the symptoms of the former COVID virus, except much, much worse, as with it came a severe hit to one's mental cognition. The world was at a standstill as a second wave spread rapidly across the globe. The only way to stop the spread was to separate the sick from the healthy, and that was when the first wall was raised. What was promised to be just a temporary solution till a vaccine could be produced turned out to be but a faint hope. As one wall became two, two became three, three became four, four became five, and finally 5 became 6. In 2029, by the time scientists had finally found a way to stop the mutation, it was too late. They could not cure it. This led the city of Seoul divided into 6 sectors. This is that story. The story of Enclave, and in it, the story of Hannah Kang. In 2019, Hannah Kang had just finished her epidemiology studies under mentorship of Professor Park when the COVID-19 virus hit the world. With the pressure rising as the eyes of the world were watching, Professor Park, with the assistance of Hannah, managed to produce a vaccine in 2021. Hannah's contributions were imperative to the vaccine's development, yet Professor Park decided to reveal the vaccine to the public without her consent. It was a great success. He couldn't wait for all the fame and recognition that was awaiting him. After Professor Park revealed the vaccine to the public, Hannah was now at the pinnacle of her career as an epidemiologist. Her contributions to the cure through her work with Professor Park had landed her a lot of recognition, and she even managed to open her own laboratory, an accomplishment not many women of her time would even dream of. The virus slowly faded from memory and turned into a finished chapter for Hannah. However, as 5 years passed, the virus suddenly spread rapidly throughout the world again. It mutated due to a pathogen introduced by the very vaccine Professor Park and Hannah had developed. The virus spread through respiratory droplets, just as the COVID-19 virus that came before it. But this time around, as Hannah and the world would soon come to realize, curing it would be no easy task. In 2050, almost 25 years had passed since the outbreak. Hannah now lives in one of the complexes nearby her workplace in Sector 1. Overlooking a waterfront park near the Han River, Hannah appreciates how the sector is vibrant with nature and with life.
조용히 해.
When Hannah thinks about her life, she really feels lucky, even though she was once infected by the virus. And while she knows she has a good life in Sector 1, she's also troubled by the sheer amount of responsibility on her shoulders. A responsibility to one day find a cure to the virus. Sitting in her room, Hannah thinks about her younger brother, about how she had seen him descend the levels of the Enclave, one by one, till the dreadful day he reached Sector 5, and she became unable to ever see her younger brother's face again. As he was descending the sectors throughout the years, Hannah felt increasingly troubled, as she blamed herself for what had happened to the world, and ultimately what had happened to him. Hannah knew she could not give up now. She had to finish her research, so that the world of Enclave could once again be united, and her with her brother. However, not long thereafter, as one day while Hannah is on her way to work, she receives the news that her younger brother had been killed in a riot in Sector 5. Restless, confused, and angry, Hannah was at a loss for words. But one thing she was certain of: this could not go on any longer. Hannah goes to the head of the board, requesting a series of tests to be conducted on subjects from Sector 5, as only they carry the most potent strain of the virus, and the people Hannah believes holds the secret of the missing piece to arriving at a vaccine and solving the crisis of this world. However, no matter what Hannah says or what Hannah does, they won't listen to her. Why would they? Why would they listen to a woman? Why would they listen to the woman who failed them all 25 years ago?
Chairman of the board, I believe I'm on the verge of doing what no one has done before, producing a vaccine that will rid the Enclave of the virus. But in order to do so, I will need to acquire test subjects from Sector 5.
Hold. You want me to bring people from Sector 5 into Sector 1? Are you out of your mind?
Chairman Lee, please understand that this could solve
Dr.
every...
Kang, enough. You have once again shown your incompetence by even suggesting such a thing. We will not risk the safety of our people for the sake of some woman's
Chairman
mad
Lee,
idea.
please understand.
Enough! The meeting is adjourned. We will hear no more. Guards, please escort Dr. Kang back to her laboratory.
Hannah marches to her laboratory. What could she possibly do to change the board's mind? This couldn't be it. If she couldn't test on subjects from Sector 5, she would just have to test it on herself. As such, Hannah infects herself with the most potent strain of the virus, utilizing her own body as a catalyst for a cure, knowing full well it might just kill her. Introducing this potent virus strain into her own body turned out to be too much for even her to handle. Undergoing an epileptic shock, Hannah stumbles to the floor, knocking over beakers, vials, and equipment before passing out on the cold laboratory floor. As she in the distance hears the faint echo of an alarm going off. When Hannah finally wakes up, her vision is hazy and her head is spinning. She's not exactly sure where she is. However, slowly coming to her senses, she realizes she's in the isolation chamber of the sector, with individuals wearing full PPE equipment watching her every move behind a massive glass panel. Hannah's mind is starting to race beyond compare. She finally accomplished what she had set out to do. The vaccine must have worked, but why then is she still locked up? Knocking on the glass, Hannah is desperately trying to tell the individuals that she's not infected. But at this point, these people have heard this story a million times before and don't pay her any attention.
I did it. It worked. The vaccine. It worked. Do you hear me? It worked. Why are you not listening to me? Hello? Can you even hear me? You have to listen to me. I'm not infected. I produce a cure. You have to let me out.
But why then is she still locked up? Despite Hannah's every attempt to communicate with these individuals behind the glass panel, she does not get as much as a confirmation that they can even hear her. As the door opens on her right, a speaker in the room calls out,
Please proceed in an orderly manner, Miss Kang. Your transportation is awaiting. Any disobedience is futile and will be punished accordingly.
Hannah, not really having a choice, enters what appears to be an elevator and gets lowered down to a train platform. As she is descending, she recognizes the station. She used to transfer here before the virus, but now, the old escalators and stairs were entirely empty and remain but a vague reminder of what used to be. As the elevator reached the bottom, she sees a train entering the platform from the south, while on her right, a series of automatic robots separated by a glass wall are moving around what appears to be storage boxes. The station, as everything else in the sector, is near spotless. Hannah already knows that she's getting deported to Sector 5. She knew the risk when she infected herself. But she also knows that it was a mere side effect, and that the vaccine just needed time to bond with her DNA. At this point, Hannah feels restless. She knows her time is limited. She knows that she is not infected. But no matter what, no one will listen to her. As Hannah leaves the station, she thinks to herself,
What happened? People used to listen to me.
Hannah arrives at the checkpoint in Sector 5 after some time. Walking through the dark corridors of this run-down chamber, Hannah gets the first glimpse of Sector 5. As Hannah is walking through the corridors, a loudspeaker in the corner catches her attention.
Welcome to Sector 5. Please proceed to your assigned accommodation, Building 42, Apartment 15. We kindly remind you that partaking in any rebellious activities or assisting the rebellion in any way will be punished accordingly and severely.
Leaving the confinement of the arrival area of Sector 5, Hannah walks outside, turns her head, and for the first time gets a glimpse of the border checkpoint. Massive concrete walls separate her and everyone else in Sector 5 from the outside world. Guards raised above the masses in fortified towers as barbed wire discourages the last hope of escape for anyone residing in Sector 5. The transparent glass walls of the park near her home in Sector 1 looks almost comical compared to what she experiences here. Hannah has no choice. She knows how Enclave is structured. She knows that fighting the system will only get her killed, just like her brother. She had to find another way out. As Hannah is walking around almost hopelessly looking for her assigned apartment, she for the first time in her life gets a glimpse of what Sector 5 is truly like. Run-down streets, graffiti plastered on the walls, trash lying everywhere, while in the distance, massive structures tower over everything else in the sector, while an intertwined network of cable cars connect these seemingly rugged buildings. In the distance, she vaguely sees Building 42 outlined in massive letters. Hannah recognizes these towers that used to be the landmarks of the area, but now, with the sector overpopulated, these abandoned towers were instead covered in small modular makeshift dwellings as far as her eyes could see, only connected by an intertwined web of cable cars. Hannah grabs one of the cable cars and soon arrives at a newly appointed home. A small, mold-infested apartment stuffed to the brim with the previous owner's belongings. Soju bottles scattered on the floor, which is a tiny square window, giving her a slight glimpse of the massive towers outside. What was she going to do? She needed to come up with a plan to get back into Sector 1, so she could reproduce the cure. But how? Sitting in her home, Hannah glances over the TV hanging on the wall. She remembers watching the riots in Sector 5 as they unfolded, and how one name kept reappearing: Kim Jong-gi. Hannah, in desperation, goes looking for this person. Leaving the confinements of her home, Hannah goes deeper and deeper into the dark and gloomy alleyways of Sector 5. Hannah is terrified and shocked by what she sees in Sector 5. On one hand, she wants to run, but at the same time she's scared she might make herself known to whoever is lurking in the darkness. She feels her heartbeat increasing.
This is all my fault. These people, this world is suffering because of me.
Running, Hannah stumbles and falls to the ground, but by the time she recovers, a huge shadowy figure is approaching her from the alleyway.
Wait! Stop!
This is the end. He's gonna kill me. Or worse, I have to run!
Hannah does not know where. She just runs as fast as her legs can carry her, deeper and deeper into the darkness of Sector 5. Looking over her shoulder, Hannah stumbles in the wet pavement and falls to the ground, as she sees the shadowy figure once again following her, drawing closer and closer to her, before finally towering over her. Hannah is scared beyond belief. Who is this man? What is he going to do to her? Is he going to hurt her? He's from Sector 5. Of course he's going to hurt her, Hannah thinks to herself. Hannah is barely able to get a word out. Her body is shaking as she, through the tears, managed to utter a single sentence.
No! No, wait! Please don't hurt me! I beg of you!
I'm not here to hurt you, Professor Khan. I need your help. It's my daughter. She's sick. I don't know what to do.
Me? Why? What kind of help?
The man reaches out his hand as Hannah closes her eyes and cowers in fear. It turns out Hannah had completely misjudged this individual, as he held out his hand not to hurt her, but to help her back up. He further introduces himself as Kim Jong-gi. He had recognized her as a scientist from Sector 1 and wanted her help, as his daughter was immensely sick, and he was denied entry into Sector 2 for medical care. What Hannah had initially thought was a mere criminal, rebel, or murderer turned out to be more human than anyone she had encountered in even Sector 1. He did not blame her for what had happened. He was simply a father desperately looking for help. Hannah follows Kim Jong-gi out of the alleyway towards his home. Walking through the narrow streets of the sector, Hannah starts to question all the propaganda from the other sectors, painting the inhabitants of Sector 5 as nothing but criminals. This man sure didn't seem like one. Following Kim Jong-gi, Hannah gets a true glimpse of Sector 5. Passing through an opening in the street where dozens of people were sharing a meal by the curbside, where despite the rundown exterior, laughter and smiles filled the space. In that moment, Hannah thought to herself in confusion.
This is not what the upper sectors made us believe Sector 5 was like. These people seemed almost more free and more happy than any of the other sectors.
Arriving at Kim Jong-gi's apartment, Hannah meets his daughter, Gina. She looks incredibly sick and needs medical care from Sector 1. However, her father was denied access to the hospitals outside the sectors. Hannah, not being a doctor, does what she can, but even to her it's apparent that she needs medicine if she's to survive the week. Hannah starts questioning their entire worldview, the upper sectors that had made her believe for all those years. Once again, she's overwhelmed with emotion, She didn't know it was this bad in Sector 5. This was her fault. She had to correct her mistakes.
Why did the doctors from Sector 1 not help Gina? Wasn't this their job? These are still our people. What is going on down here?
As Hannah is sitting next to Gina, Kim Jung-gi speaks up.
Miss Kim, I have to tell you something. I knew your brother quite well. He spoke highly of you. I am sorry for your loss. He fought for what was right. If there is any way I can be of assistance, please let me know. But in return, please help Gina. She has done nothing wrong. She does not deserve this.
Fought for what was right? But they said he died in a riot. Why would they lie to me?
Hannah sighs. These lies of Sector 1 could not go on. She had to finish this. Hannah, together with Kim Jung-gi, returns to the Sector 5 border checkpoint. Hannah is waiting nearby some waste bags around the corner of the entrance for Kim Jung-gi to do as instructed, when suddenly the power goes off. She hears the alarm echoing from within the chamber as the guards rush towards the border. The alarm is the signal for her to sneak into the station and reach the train. Hannah gets up and runs as fast as she can into the darkness of the chamber. She knew every single second counted. In the darkness, Hannah sneaks through the corridors of the station. Hannah notices the cameras being off, but she's not sure for how long. In the distance, she hears a guard fumbling around the corridors. The guard hears Hannah and calls out, "Who's there?" Frightened, Hannah tries to move as silently as she can. As she's about to turn the corner of the hallway, the lights suddenly come back on. She looks over her shoulder and sees the same guard she had heard just a second ago yell out,
Stop!
As he starts charging towards her. Hannah can see the train in the distance and runs as fast as her legs can carry her. She sees that the doors are closing, but sprinting, Hannah managed to jump on board the train mere seconds before the doors close behind her. She turns around and hears the thump of the guard hitting the windows of the wagon spread across the station. Catching her breath, Hannah breathes a sigh of relief. She made it. She actually made it. Sitting alone in the empty wagon, Hannah remembers visiting the city center, which is now Sector 2. But nowadays she would only ever leave her apartment to go to her lab and then back home in the evening. Social gatherings, friends, dinners, birthdays, they were all but faint memories of her life before Enclave. Caught in her own thoughts, Hannah hears an announcement over the loudspeakers.
Remind you that speaking is strictly prohibited within the borders of Sector 2. We thank you for your continuous understanding and cooperation. And remember, a sector of silence is a sector of safety.
Leaving the wagon, Hannah quickly joins up with a group of people on the other side of the platform, as to not raise suspicion, and follows them through a set of doors. Waiting in line, Hannah can see an agent in the distance implanting a small circular device into the necks of the people waiting in line. Having been on the board, Hannah recognized these devices. They were introduced within the borders of Sector 2 to support non-verbal communication in a sector entirely rid of verbal speech, and as such were mandatory for anyone wishing to enter the sector. Tapping into the biological signals of the wearer, the device translates emotional signals into correlating colors, thereby providing a new and safer means of communication within the sector. Before long, it was Hannah's turn. With the implant, Hannah was ready to enter Sector 2. Following a group of people, she enters a nearby elevator and starts ascending from the basement. Hannah is forced to squint and cover her eyes as the dark corridors of the metro slowly fades below her, replaced by a magnificent display of luxury, as a golden staircase spiraling up beside the elevator gives Hannah the first glimpse of the light and luxurious lifestyle that is Sector 2B. Hannah makes her way through the building and walks outside. Despite expecting it, Hannah was still taken aback by the fact that people around her were not saying a single word. Yet, the world felt louder than ever. Banners, commercials, loudspeakers were everywhere, trying to sell every product imaginable, yet not a single voice to be heard. The sector appeared almost as an amusement park. No cars in sight, as instead, expansive lush green parks took up the ground floor, only disrupted by the massive towers in the distance, with roller coasters interweaving throughout as a bus of drones took up the sky. Walking among the massive towers of the sector, Hannah spots a crowd gathered around the screen. Making her way there, she sees there's a news segment playing, covering the currently ongoing unveiling of Sector 2's new University Hospital, SNUH City Center. However, to Hannah's surprise, she sees that Professor Park will be physically present and attending the opening ribbon-cutting ceremony of the hospital.
Government officials just started the opening of the recently built Seoul National University Hospital, SNUH City Center. Professor Park himself was present at the opening ceremony to cut the ribbon.
It's starting to dawn on Hannah that she would never be able to get into Sector 1 all by herself. However, reaching Professor Park, on the other hand, might just be a possibility.
Why would he show up at the hospital during the pandemic? But then again, he was always the type that wanted to take credit for everything he even remotely touched. Perhaps I can use this in my favor.
Hannah arrives at the hospital not long after, but the opening ceremony had already ended and people were slowly dispersing from the area. How would she ever find Professor Park in the midst of this chaos? Not knowing what to do, Hannah thankfully sees Professor Park get into a private drone taxi parked not far from the premises. Perhaps luck would actually be in her favor for once. Seeing the drone ascend from the platform, Hannah rushes into one of the nearby towers, catching a drone taxi from the upper floor as quickly as she can. However, by the time she is finally in the air, the black taxi of Professor Park was just a small silhouette in the distance across the Han River. Hannah frantically prompts the virtual driver to follow Professor Park across the river. Hannah is anxious and keeps thinking that this is her only chance. She mustn't lose him. She can't lose him. To Hannah's relief, the drone is able to keep up, albeit not catch up, to Professor Park. She sees his drone land nearby a restaurant on the ground, somewhere Hannah is not able to go. Hannah instead has to land on one of the massive towers from which she departed earlier, and by the time she has reached the ground, Professor Park is nowhere to be seen. Hannah does not have much time to figure out a plan, and instead rushes through the doors of the restaurant. Once inside the restaurant, Hannah's gaze flickers from the left to the right, scouting for any clue of where Professor Park might be. In front of her, a massive glass panel stands isolated at the center of the otherwise empty room. On it, a list of occupants and designated room numbers flickers every few seconds as the information updates. Hannah knows that the sensors of the restaurant will already have picked up on her ID chip belonging to Sector 5, at which point police would arrive not long thereafter. She had no time to waste. As her gaze runs down the list, she spots Professor Park's name and his reserved room. Hannah, without hesitation, almost runs through the empty hallways of the restaurant, inspecting every single terminal she passes, looking for the room where she would be able to find Mr. Park. Reaching the end of the hallway, Hannah spots an individual guarding an isolated area of the restaurant that seemed reserved for special guests. This had to be it. As Hannah drew closer, the individual started raising his hand as to signal Hannah to stop. Hannah, however, looked him straight in the eyes with such a determined and intimidating look that not a second later his arm was back down by his side, as he took a step back and let Hannah pass. Once inside the isolated eating area, it doesn't take Hannah long to find the room number belonging to Professor Park. Hannah walks with urgent steps towards the door.
Professor Park, you have to listen to me. I know I'm not supposed to talk, but I am cured. I can spread a virus that I don't have. And this is too urgent. Every second counts.
The circular device in Hannah's neck, now flashing a bright red, mimicking her increased heartbeat and emotional state, starts to slowly fade as Hannah attempts to gather her thoughts and calm down slightly as she continues.
Professor Park, listen to me. My name is Hannah. We worked together 30 years ago.
Professor Park, startled by the events, reaches over to hit a small circular button alerting the staff. Park, not saying a word, thinks to himself.
Who is this woman?
Just as Hannah, Professor Park is wearing a circular piercing on his neck, as its previously calm blue tint turns a dark red, hinting as his temper racing.
I have managed to do what we failed to do back then. I produced a cure for the virus. I need your help.
As the still startled staff arrive in the room, Professor Park stood up in all his might and swung his arm across the room as to signal the staff to remove this woman from his sight. Turning to the staff, Hannah yells out,
No! Do not go anywhere near me!
Hannah, once again looking at Professor Park, continues.
You have to believe me. I actually did it. Utilizing the virus potency strain of a fully exposed subject allowed me to reverse engineer the cure. Please, just listen to me.
Hannah's piercing slowly fades to a grey tint, as if hope had faded from her voice. At this point, Professor Park had had enough.
What are you rambling about? I never failed. A vaccine was and still is impossible. Now get this woman out of my sight and don't make me break the rules again.
No, I did it. Test me. What do you have to lose? If I am speaking the truth, you could help me produce a cure. Everyone would remember your name.
By this point, the police had arrived at the restaurant and Hannah was being detained for everyone to see. Professor Park, still somewhat startled, thinking about what had just happened, was about to raise his hand, but on second thoughts, lowers it again. As Hannah was being escorted out, she thought to herself that she'd failed. She'd failed Gina. She'd failed her brother. She'd failed everyone. In the grip of the two police officers, Hannah faints from the sheer amount of exhaustion that had impacted her for the past many days. 8 hours later, Hannah wakes up, not really sure where she is or how long she's been out, but it quickly dawns on her that she was in the isolation chamber in Sector 2. As she was snapping out of her sleepy gaze, she would hear a guard furiously yelling in the background. That is probably what woke her, talking to a man wearing a black suit. She sat up on the bed and tried to gather her thoughts and figure out what was happening. She saw the unknown man in the suit pull a piece of paper from his suitcase and hand it over to the guard of the chamber before proceeding in a straight line towards Hannah. The man handed over a note to Hannah from Professor Park through a little isolated crevice in the front door. As Hannah opened the letter, she saw a single sentence written on it.
Prove it.
With Professor Park's authority, Hannah was escorted out of the isolation chamber to a nearby isolated hospital as to undergo a medical check and determine her current infection level. Escorted by the police, Hannah arrives at the hospital and gets placed in an isolated chamber with one-way glass covering every wall. She knew Professor Park would be watching, and chances were several other people as well. She just hoped the vaccine had not worn off by now, because if it had, what would she do? This was her only chance if they were to ever believe her again. Seconds turned to minutes, and what felt like an eternity for Hannah. She awaited the results of the test, and when the test finally did come back negative, the room went dead silent. Professor Park, an otherwise composed man, looked lost for words. What had just happened? It could not be. How? Her? A woman? Hannah hears a distant beep as a huge door opens. Through it, Professor Park steps into the room. Hannah is allowed to return to her lab in Sector 1 with Professor Park. Together, they develop a process through which Hannah's cure can be mass-produced. But despite Professor Park's every attempt to try and take full credit for Hannah's work, the news of what had happened at the hospital had spread across the Enclave, and despite never being publicly recognized, everyone knew it was Hannah and not Professor Park that produced the cure and ended the Enclave. As the drones previously built to keep people separated were now dispatched across the Enclave to unite them, Hannah had one last promise she had to keep. As Hannah was on her way to Sector 5 with the medicine for Gina, she saw as people were celebrating in the streets. Laughs and tears filled the air. Borders were shut down, and was it not for their massive scale, Hannah was sure the walls would fall as walls had always done throughout history. Sitting in the metro, Hannah thought to herself that finally the world could go back to normal. But quite frankly, she was not even sure what that word meant nowadays. Normal. If the past was normal, then what are we to call the present? Hannah did not know, but one thing she was certain of. It was time to figure it all out, one step at a time.